It's been somewhere around 30 years since I've had an off-road buggy, but I knew I wanted to check out the associated cars when I decided to get one now. I got this kit with the B5m update from Anderson RC in Thomasville, North Carolina. They are my go-to guys whenever I need anything from the RC world. And they were able to help me get the right aka tires and inserts for just goofing around in my backyard or the empty lot someplace. And I wasn't surprised to see that Castle is still one of the hotshot people in electric car racing or pretty much any kind of electric racing. I used Castle speed controllers in all of my helicopters when I flew those, so it wasn't hard for me to pick up a Sidewinder 3 for my RC10. Castle stuff is pretty much just plug and play, and I like that kind of thing. To drive my new RC10, I'm going to be using the Spectrum DX4S. And yes, I'm going to be using the SRS 4210 receiver that has the active vehicle control in it. I know some of you are going to be poo-pooing for me using what amounts to a gyro in this car, but I'm probably twice as old as you, so just take a break. One thing that didn't surprise me is opening the box and finding it full of high-end parts. Yes, the kit is made in China, but this is what happens when an American company tells them you want really good stuff. It turns out they'll make whatever you're willing to pay for. All of the parts are grouped in bags that actually follow the instruction manual along. If you can see and read at the same time, getting this car wrong is going to be pretty hard to do. This is the B5m update kit that has everything you need to make this a mid-engine car, and that's exactly what I did. I'm from the old school dirt stock car crowd, and there was just no way in hell I was going to hang the motor out behind the rear axle. You also get a bunch of these sheets that show other cars and trucks that Associated makes. But in the same bag, you also get the instruction manual. And once again, Associated goes to the head of the class for the quality of this manual. The RC world in general is kind of getting known for having absolutely ridiculous instruction manuals. Associated took the time and spent the money to do this upright. Plus, all of these are available as PDFs on their site for download. If you're going to use the B5m update kit like I did, you can download that manual from their website. All of the manuals feature really professional writing and illustrations that are second to none in the industry. Associated didn't skimp on the quality of these illustrations nor the size. They make them big enough that you can actually see what's going on. And here's a fastener list with all of the fasteners shown in real size so you can match things up. Throughout the manual, you find these little tips for setting the car up. A lot of these options are for different kind of track services, so it's good to read through these things and see which one's closest for what you plan on doing. The first thing we build is the steering assembly, and this is just flat amazing. There's absolutely no slop and no hard spots in moving it. And that's because the steering assembly alone in this car has more ball bearing sets in it than my whole other truck. The B5m transmission is different from the other one, but it's just remarkably smooth. And yes, all of the gears have ball bearings in them. The gears continue to spin freely after the case is assembled, so it's hard to imagine that there's any kind of a drag loss here. I know there has to be some, but I'll bet it isn't much. To show you how good everything fits in this kit, once the transmission's done, it literally clicks into place in the chassis. Run all the screws in for it, and the back end of the car is remarkably strong. 30 years ago, RC shocks were better at making the car look better than actually making it handle better. I found out quickly that Associated's taken that whole thing to a different level. Everything in these shocks works very well, and they actually do make the car work better. And just like the coilovers on real dirt cars, these are fully adjustable, and you can do a lot of tuning to the chassis with just these shocks. All of the suspension arm lengths and pivot points are dead on. Hitting a bump with this car doesn't mean that it's going to turn on you. The suspension has understandably a lot of throw, but the arms are very smooth through that whole range. And the tires don't lose camber as you go through that range of travel. Despite all the precision in this transmission, I was happy to see that my old way of setting pinion depth with using a piece of paper still works. With the paper between the gears, we tighten the motor down so it holds that position and pull the paper out. And if you did everything right, you should have just a little bit of play all the way around the big spur gear. You should always check that play all the way around the gear. Not surprisingly, the associated gears are perfectly round, so the gear mesh doesn't change at all. While I was at Anderson RC, I picked up a set of Duratrax body tools that really made cutting up the body a lot easier. The ream lets you make perfectly sized holes for your pins without tearing the body when the drill grabs hold of it. This is the body that comes with the kit, and it's really not designed for the B5m option, but you can cut it up to make it fit. I figured I'd sacrifice this one so I could relearn how to cut the bodies and paint them. It's been a long time since I used an airbrush, but I decided to get a decent one from Pache. And yes, I got this at Anderson RC as well. It's not real fancy, but it does the job very well, and it's easy to use. And while I was there, I picked up some water-based fast colors for painting the body. These paints work well on the Lexan, and they're dead easy to clean up. There's nothing fancy about it, but for my first body in 30 years, I think it came out pretty well. I also have another J Concepts body that's meant for the B5m, and I'll be adding that to the car a little later. This is the B5m body that I believe is on the car through all of the initial videos we shot. It was a lot easier to cut to fit this chassis. Keep in mind that this is the second body that I've done in 30-some years. This is my short track test track in the backyard just off the patio. The Carolina summers usually mean that most of the grass goes dormant, so I've got pretty much a free hand at where I want to run the car. And as soon as I started turning laps around the flower bed, I was finding out that active vehicle control isn't a driver in a box. I could see right away that I was going to have to adjust my driving and probably do some tweaking on the car too. What impressed me about this chassis is when I did make some changes, I could see the difference. If I was going for pure time and speed, I'd be getting rid of some of this looseness in the car, but for just slinging dirt around in the backyard, I love it. Of course, that means you can go in the corner a little too fast, too. But after a couple of batteries worth adjusted on the car and figuring out a better line around the track, I was having a good time with my RC10. I'm still messing up, and the kid down the street can probably beat my butt at this, but I'm not letting him in the yard, and I'm having fun by myself.